Hey y'all, welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
Hey guys, I'm Matt. Welcome to Gardening 101. We air these on Fridays where we answer your favorite gardening and maple related questions. So if you have questions, put those in the comment section below. We love getting suggestions from you guys and it helps us a lot in getting to the most burning questions you have about Japanese maples and beyond.
Like, subscribe, and share. And remember, if you find this information very informative, make sure you shop on MrMaple.com. We'd really appreciate it. Today we've got a great topic for you, and it's why is the term mature height misleading with Japanese maples?
Hey, our industry insiders here at Mr. Maple are doing some investigative journalism, and we're going to get to the bottom of this and expose the truth for you guys today on our episode.
Now, the term mature height, it's extremely misleading. I mean, we run into this all the time. People say, what is the mature height on this plant?
I love when I have people, we don't have as many people here at the nursery anymore. We're hoping to open up more in 2023. We used to do everything by appointment here at the nursery, and it always cracked me up when people would fact check me in real time. So I would have people walking around our nursery and they would say, how big does elegans get? And I'd be like, well, this is, typically how big this tree is in 10 years. And they'd go like, bloop, 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 bloop. Well, this website here says it's only 6 foot at maturity. And that's kind of a catch-all term that can be, a little bit misleading here.
And we're standing beside a 6'7" gallon.
Well, I'm standing here next to one right now, and it's about 5 years old, so I guess it hit maturity. I don't know that I've hit maturity yet, and I'm 41. So what does maturity mean? And it can typically be a catch-all term for maples. If you wanted to get to the crux of it, is it when it's seeding? Is maturity when a tree seeds?
Typically that's 6 to 7 years.
Is maturity when a tree reaches its max size? I think that's what a lot of people think it means.
And that is preposterous.
Right.
I mean, Matt and I had the privilege of going and seeing Nakakomoto weeping in Japan. And this plant is over 400 years old conservatively. Mm-hmm. And the stakes on it are over 200 years old. This tree is a giant.
Some estimations say over 600.
Yeah. And we have 1 gallons of it. And for us to tell people that it's going to get, as big as that plant was, which was probably 25 feet tall, probably 35, 40 foot wide. Mm-hmm. That would be ridiculous because this plant is over 400 years old. No one's ever going to see that in their lifetime.
One of the things I think is the hardest in our horticulture industry is that people want to say, this is the max size this one will ever get. And I honestly do feel that's misleading. That's one of the reasons we shy away from the term at maturity here at our nursery. And what we try to do is to give you a more honest answer by saying, after 10 years of growth, or after 15 years of growth, this is the size expectancy under normal conditions. Now that can vary as well. So if you're growing this tree in East Texas, and if you're growing this tree in Connecticut, that East Texas tree is getting 2 extra months of growth and a lot more heat. So there's a chance that tree is going to be a lot bigger than that tree grown in Connecticut. So there are some changes there that can occur, environmentally and regionally for the overall growth. But we feel by saying, in a time frame, it gives gardeners a better understanding of what to truly expect. Now, a lot of people, even Peter Gregory was a good friend of mine. Love Peter Gregory. He's a species guy. So his approach to typically explaining how big something gets is by seeing it in the wild and then saying, wow, I saw a 42-foot Acer elegantium. This one can range up to 42 feet, which makes a lot of sense for people observing plants in their native habitat, grown from seed. You're looking at a range of conditions and a little bit of variability. And it makes a lot of sense with species to explain it by the largest one ever seen. To explain Tamukiyama by the largest one you've ever seen to your average customer wouldn't really help a lot.
I think the one that's most misleading in this book is Acer palmatum filigree, dissectum filigree. I mean, Peter Gregory updated maybe the pocket guide to say that, I once saw a 12-foot one in Japan.
Right.
And
that's fair.
And it was high grafted.
Uh-huh.
And so it was high grafted and cascading. And so this plant is not going to be a 12-foot plant.
Right. If you graft that tree at 6 feet, you've already started out larger than 99% of them will ever reach in a 50-year span. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this plant, filigree is typically going to be 3 to 4 feet in 10 years. And to say it's 12 feet could be very, very misleading. The other thing that this does, when we use this term mature height being the biggest one we've ever seen, is it makes the older cultivars giants.
Right.
And the new cultivars that have just gotten introduced dwarfs.
Because the biggest one you see on all the websites too. And so we try to give it the best honest answer. We'll observe the rate as compared to other cultivars when explaining sizes.
Like the book says Osakazuki's a 25-foot tree.
Right.
And
there's some old Osakazukis. I mean, you can find Osakazukis that are 100 years old.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not true of something that came out in the 90s or the early 2000s. And so often those are going to be listed as 10 to 12 foot that actually grow at the same growth rate as Osakazuki.
Yeah, people are introducing mini Osakazuki seedling types, and they have the same growth rate as Osakazuki. Right. And they're dwarfs while the other one is a giant. Mm-hmm. And so it's very misleading. So we always try to give that time range because that tells you about how fast this tree grows. Now, there is something to be said that an older tree in certain conditions can start putting on smaller and smaller growth.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely a size at which a lot of these trees slow down. And that's part of what we try to catch in our description too. I mean, you're certainly, even after a very long time, gonna have a smaller fire glow than an Emperor 1. Mm-hmm. Because the Emperor 1's just gonna be a larger size tree. And there is a size frame which each cultivar kind of does reach a size in which it slows down greatly.
But Japanese maples, if they're not growing, they're dead.
Right.
And they put on growth once during the spring when they leaf out, and typically again during the summer. Some places down in Texas may even get a third flush of growth. But typically you get 2 flushes of growth out of a Japanese maple. And it may be a really small amount of growth, but they're still putting on growth.
Every single year that tree's alive, it's grown. And if it hasn't, it's dead. Right?
Exactly.
So I think it's hard for a lot of the horticulture industry to even wrap their head around a little bit, because there's so many other types of plants and other types of growth. Japanese maples are one of those plants that outlives most things in our garden. Like a healthy grafted Japanese maple should live to be well over 100 years old. So in regards to that, it's easier to say how big a redbud gets or a dogwood gets, because they don't have quite that kind of lifespan of a maple. Maples live so much longer. And as far as herbaceous plants, I talk to herbaceous growers sometimes. They're like, oh, I see you only give a height in 10 years. What's the max size? Because herbaceous stuff tends to have a max size. You can say a really old hosta is going to get this big. It's easy to say that, but that's not true of a Japanese maple. You're going to continue to increase in size. And we want to give the right parameters to help all of our customers best gauge where to place their maple.
And what's happened is that the term mature height with Japanese maples has become a marketing term. Hey, this one's really small, the garden's shrinking, this one's really small, the mature height on this one is this. And the problem is some people choose 5 years for their mature height, some people choose 10, some people choose 20, some people
the ones that kill me, my favorite, well, not least favorite, my least favorite are the ones that say these really vague terms. Like I saw one the other day where somebody said, they had this really new plant, and they said, this tree gets 3 to 15 feet at maturity. Like, dang, 3 to 15 feet, that's a wide range. 3 to 15 feet, that's a lot of leeway there.
Sometimes it's best just to say, this is a new plant.
Right.
Join in our evaluation, this plant's really cool. If it really deserves to be introduced, but we don't really know its mature height.
Right. So there are a lot of variabilities. We want to explain this to you to give you a better understanding. Now, there certainly are many dwarf Japanese maples that are going to stay relatively small relative to a small amount of age. So that's not to say that all Japanese maples are going to get massive and outgrow your spot, because picking the right tree, you can pick a tree that's going to look awesome in a small area garden for quite a long time. People get wrapped up in the time frame too. When you say, one of the hardest things about what we do is you say, in 15 years, this one's this big, and everybody goes, I'll be dead in 15 years. And they don't think about that you can enjoy this tree at every single stage. Oftentimes, the gardens I've been to that are 50 years old, I don't enjoy them or interact with them in the same way I do a 5 to 10-year-old Japanese maple garden.
Think about the Hopewood tree.
Right.
I mean, that tree we know was planted in the late 1800s.
Right.
To early 1900s.
Well,
Plant is a large tree.
When did it hit maturity?
When did it hit maturity? This plant has a huge base. We've got a whole video just on the Hopewood tree. We've got it in fall color. We've got it in the Hopewood Estate video as well. Right. And this plant is ginormous. What would someone have said the mature size on that plant was? And it's something just hard to wrap your head around, because Japanese maples are so long-lived.
And they actually outlive most gardeners' expectancy toward their home or their expectancy for gardening. Most of your other plants don't live long enough to be considered how big they're going to get anyway. So if people
15 years, that's a great.
If you're living with a plant that's 15 years, that's most people's gardening window for how long they expect that garden to look a certain way.
But that's what I love about Japanese maples too, is when your red buds and these other plants have aged out and you're taking them back out, your Japanese maple has just grown, grown in value, grown in beauty, and grown in size.
It's there for that next generation to enjoy. And a healthy maple, as you've heard me say, can live to be well over 100 years. We've seen multiple over 100-year-old trees And that Nakakomoto weeping, I mean, did it hit maturity at 200, or was it, it's like going on the Noah time frame here. I mean, that tree's easily over 400 years old. So, there's always some new growth happening. That's not to say that there's not some amazing dwarfs. You can check out a lot of really cool dwarf maples on Mr. Maple. That'll stay relatively small, relative to a short amount of time too.
We really appreciate you. I hope this helped you understand why the term mature height is misleading with Japanese maples.
We always think that a time frame is the most honest answer for how big a tree gets. That gives you an amount of time you can kind of wrap your head around what to expect from this individual cultivar. Think of cultivars like breeds of dogs. We often say that here. You don't want to plant a Chihuahua where you're planting a Great Dane, and you might not want that Great Dane where you're wanting a Chihuahua. That might be a little too big for your spot. So hopefully, size estimates over time gives you a better understanding of how to garden with Japanese maples.
Take care.
God bless.
And have an awesome day.